Hello everyone, this is Beth back again with another art book review. This time the book that we're going to be reviewing is Drawing from Line to Life. And the author is Mark Sibley. He is an English artist who currently lives in England at the moment. But he is a realist artist who specializes in graphite. Now I know there are many like digital artists, or like myself, I draw but I use color. His are more black and white, but the techniques that he uses in throughout the book are really good for, whatever other medium that you may use. And what I found out about this book that I very liked about it is it's very detailed and very thorough. However, it does not have like set off to the side practices and examples. The tutorials and methods or whatever practices that are in it are written with the information that is also in each of the chapters. So you kind of have to be paying attention to be able to figure out where those are at. But because of how detailed and thorough it is, it really goes into details about how to do those said techniques, and even behind like sciences and the math involved in being able to do those techniques properly. And that's what I really enjoyed about it, considering that's more correlates to the kind of artwork that I like to do, which is realism, very detailed. This review will be a little bit different. The last one I did was not as chapter by chapter based. However, this one will be. It'll still just be a basic overview. But, so if you really want the full details of everything, you're going to have to buy the book. Which I mentioned that in my last video, because I think that was a fear that some had, that thought this was going to be a very detailed step-by-step breakdown of everything in the book, and that's not what this is. So from the first chapter is more of him kind of explaining, what all you will be learning throughout the remainder of this book. But I liked what he brought out is when you are drawing a piece or working on something, what is the emotion? What is the story that you are trying to unfold? And as you go throughout this book, he brings about something called seeing as an artist, which basically what he meant by that was being able to see the most minute and littlest details. And he said a phrase, or I said, realism and drawing can bring out the Sherlock in you. And I found that to be very true, as I myself went through and did some of these techniques myself. Second chapter, as you can see, talks about more about the tools he uses personally. But what I liked is that he even went into detail of what tools would be best to use for people who are heavy-handed or soft-handed. I tend to be very heavy-handed, so I really appreciated that, because that's some of the problems I have is when I try to erase a line, it doesn't disappear completely, and that can mess up a drawing pretty bad. And he also talked a little bit about how to being able to calculate your time properly, especially when you commission based off the amount of time it took you to do a piece. It can be kind of difficult if you don't plan properly, which is another issue that I have sometimes. And he also emphasized to not rush your work. When you read through this and some of the artworks that he does, they are absolutely amazing. But the time that it took to do some of them took from anywhere to an hour to up to 4 weeks worth of time. So really what he says, be patient with it. If you rush it, you're going to make mistakes. But from the tools, he goes into different types of pencils, pens, papers even, which is really good if you want to go into more detail of being able to kind of work with something else if maybe what you're using isn't what you like. And then here on basic techniques where he starts talking about is starting with lines, perspective, gradations, different things like that. And what techniques and stuff would be suitable for certain jobs. And this one's really what any artist can really appreciate is tone drawing. And he talks about like different methods of adding different kinds of tonal values to be able to help bring out whatever kind of texture and whatever it is that you're trying to work out in your drawing to help really give it that sense of realism. And this one talks a little more about tools, but this one is about erasing techniques. Talks soft erasers, hard erasers, different things that you can use to be able to add maybe some extra finer details to your work that you probably wouldn't be able to do with a pen or pencil or whatever. And a little bit of glimpse of some of his work. Now, blending and layering. This was something that I took a lot of information from, because blending and layering can be a very effective tool also when used when trying to do different techniques and whatnot. But he goes into more details about what can be blended, how not to blend something, particularly if a certain texture is wanting to be applied. And indenting. This one I've not seen in many other textbooks, and this one basically is what it uses. Indenting is uses negative drawing, and he goes into more details of the tools and stuff he uses and basically what the indenting does and what it can be used for. And this is a live demonstration he does of his granddaughter Charlotte. Now, he is normally known as an animal artist. For anybody that doesn't really know who Mark Sibley is, most of his works are of dogs or cats, animals. So this little bit of him doing a picture of his granddaughter was really neat, and being able to see how he demonstrated the use of some of the techniques that he would use in his other works, but kind of change it up to whatever needed to be applied. And this one I found kind of interesting, Fooling the Brain. It goes into details about how our minds tend to work. And usually what he brought out was that our minds are very simplistic, brains are very lazy. They will try to pull whatever details they can out of something to make it look what it needs to look like, whether it be right or not. And this was really insightful into that also, especially when he goes into the later chapters talking about textures and details. And this one he talks about with working with photos, references. He brings out the references are very good, they're very helpful, but he mentions also to not work specifically copying what you will see in a photo because of certain discrepancies with camera lenses and lighting and whatnot. And I found that to be really helpful too. And then negative drawing, again, something else that I've not quite seen in many other books that I have found so far anyway. But it basically teaches you and gives you the idea of how to, like it says, create something out of nothing. Being able, instead of drawing hard pressed lines to show something as grass or trees or something, using negative spaces to be able to bring those details out, making it easier on you. And then perspective. That's another one of mine that I have a real hard time with sometimes. I really like how he went really in depth and detailed into the very different types of perspective, how they work, how light when it hits it will affect it also. And this was really good for those who, have the perspective as an issue too. And then it goes right into lighting and shading, how different types of light sources and their components, from the lights to the shadows, the cast shadows. This is one of those books where you never really realize how many different parts of something are actually involved until you work on it. And I had to stop many a time to really work on some of this stuff, because it was just so in depth and so detailed. And this was Fooling the Brain Part 2. The Part 1 was about showing how to fool your brain into being able to draw what it is that you need to do without it getting in the way. This one talks more about how to do certain key characteristics in your drawing to fool the viewer's brain, to learn how to make it easier on yourself, to where you learn how to do key objects of certain points so that the viewer sees what it is that you're wanting to portray. And then transfer methods, he talks about like gridding. He even mentions that some of his works he'll even use Photoshop as a preliminary to put pieces of reference photos together to figure out what he wants to do for that certain drawing that he's working on. But it goes into like using grids, projectors, stuff that will basically show an image onto a bigger or smaller thing. And then preparation, plotting and planning. And basically this talks about how to put your pieces, like reference works or whatnot that you have, putting it all together to be able to properly plan a drawing that you plan on doing. And like with graphite, you have to be very particular about this stage. And usually what he says that if you plan it properly, it will save you a lot of time later while you're drawing from any mistakes that could possibly come from not planning it properly. And then here he does a demonstration of his cat Clary, putting some of the previous methods and stuff that he's used into this piece of his cat, which was actually for an ad to a cat food bag, and how he went into the details of putting that into consideration because the final product was going to be on a rough, non-reflective paper bag, and how he tweaked little details here and there to be able to have it show up as well as the final result. And this one's about drawing ellipses. I really did not understand why he would do a chapter just on basic ellipses until I actually read it, and you realize that a majority of the stuff that you will probably draw is an ellipse. So, and going through all the details onto it just blew my mind when I really looked into it. But he has some examples on here, like how to properly draw one, squares using perspective, how to do it properly with perspective, and then some examples of what ellipses, partial ellipses, full ellipses. It's insane. And then textures, another difficult one to be able to accomplish it and accomplish it well. However, the details that he goes into, like especially doing certain textures from like this one, he talks more into like outside textures like bricks, wood, which is one that I know a lot of people have issues with, including me, fabrics, metals, and stuff like that. And he emphasizes learning the visual keys, not so much as drawing it by the minutest detail, because doing that way can distract the viewer of what it is that you're trying to say about the piece. But I really enjoyed this chapter too. And then reflections, another problem that we can have. This one goes into a little more the science behind how reflections work, which can be helpful to, kind of learning the method now, so that when you go into doing a drawing or something, you'll be able to know, oh, well, this reflects off here this way because of that. And how it can be applied to multiple surfaces, whether it be, kind of rough, not as reflective, or shiny and highly reflective. Foliage. Very tough one if you're not very accustomed to it. I'm always kind of been leery of this myself, because you think it's super detailed. How am I ever going to finish? This is going to take forever. But I really like how he brings out some basic methods and stuff that he used to be able to get that really realistic look without stressing yourself out completely over it. And he talks like ground foliage, grasses, weeds, bushes, shrubs, trees, the perspective, and how the shadows will work through that as well. And then hair. Now, like I said, he is known to be an animal artist, but a lot of the methods and stuff that he puts throughout this book can be used for multiple things, including drawing people, anthros, furries, whatever kind of species you like to do. This one, global, local methods, which talks about the different kinds of shading involved in that. And how he mentions that most of the drawings that he does with hair is mostly negative drawings. And it was really cool because he goes into more details about it. But he really uses life as an example. Like, if you have a dog, hamster, cat, whatever, really look at how their fur is formed and how it grows, study it very thoroughly. And he emphasizes using lifelike examples a lot. And then features, this talks about more about eyes, noses, particularly dogs' noses, ears. But I really like how he goes into a little more science behind it, like the shape of the eyes, how it differs from animal to people, and points to consider when you're drawing it in perspective. Again, very detailed and very helpful in that regard. And then this is a live demonstration. I was bringing it all together. Basically, everything that you've learned up from the first chapters of this book is being placed right here. He goes step by step into this whole concept, from how he puts the pictures together digitally using Photoshop, and how he goes through his whole process of planning, doing the methods, the techniques for each individual piece of it, and how he fixed some of the mistakes that he created along the way. And I really enjoyed that, because that was like seeing how the artist actually did his work, how it developed over, some of the, like I said, textures involved. It was really interesting to see, because when you look at some of the, the final pieces, they look so detailed and so almost hyper realistic, but yet when he breaks them down and you really look at it, it's really so simple and basic. It's insane. That was the final piece of the end of this chapter. And that's what I really liked about this book, because I'm a very scientific, very detailed person myself. I really appreciated the detail and the thoroughness that he went through on this. I'm sure, depending on the styles that you want to use or that you draw, you can tweak the methods and to however you want to use them to be able to suit your needs for whatever it is you're trying to do. And index, not much there. Now, Mark Sibley also has a few websites that he runs on the side. His main website is Sibley Fine Arts, where you'll be able to shop for stuff, books, prints, but he also does tutorials on his site also. And then he also has another site called starvingartist.net where you can post your own work and kind of have it be shown around, you know. And some of the tools that he uses in this book, I guess you can't really buy them anywhere else, so he does sell them on his site. One of them being this blue tack stuff that he uses throughout his work. I don't have any personally, but he uses a kneaded eraser, and I did have that, so that's what I used. But if possible, I want to try to get that and see if I can work with it and kind of learn how to use it myself. Well, anyway, that is the end of this review. As I said, because I'm a very detailed person and realism is more my kind of thing, I really enjoyed this. But as mentioned earlier, methods involved can be used for whatever kind of artist you are. And what I like about art and the methods involved is that you can always tweak them too. So it's not verbatim. You know, you don't have to do what he does. You don't have to do what somebody else does. You can make them do however you want to be able to do it. Basically, what he emphasizes is put the emotion that you want to put into it from yourself. Anyway, I hope this was helpful and insightful. And hopefully this will be a book that will be able to help you in your near future with your endeavors. And that'll be it. Have a good day.